Welcome to Realizing Resilience, a podcast from the Connecticut Women's Consortium. We're not behavioral health professionals, but we're your gateway to real conversations with the experts. Each episode, we'll delve into the vast landscape of mental health, from personal stories to expert insights. Together, we'll bridge the gap between clinical expertise and personal experiences, connecting with diverse voices and perspectives. Join us for insightful conversations that demystify the world of mental health.
Debra Borzellino, LMFT, has a career that has extended over 30 years. Her career began as a sales representative and sales manager for medical services for a national corporation. Deb returned to higher education and obtained a Master of Science degree in Marriage and Family Therapy, focusing on systemic dynamics, conflict resolution, and strength-based development. Deb has achieved clinical fellowship and clinical supervisor status from the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy. In the nonprofit sector, Deb was responsible for leading over 12 unique state-funded programs.
Welcome back to Realizing Resilience. My name is Alana.
And I'm Marisa.
And today we have the pleasure of speaking to Debra Borzellino. So Deb, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
First and foremost, can you just talk a little bit about what led to your focus on family systems and conflict resolution?
I can. And I just want to say I'm just such a fan of the Women's Consortium and the work that you do. And I love the name Realizing Resilience. This is just a wonderful name for a podcast because we are resilient people and people are amazing in what they can accomplish in their life. So speaking of which, when I was in my 20s, I was in need of therapy and I found an absolutely wonderful therapist. And I realized back then, with all the help and the support and how she altered my life, that's what I wanted to do. And because I knew there were missing pieces and I didn't understand and didn't know what I didn't know. And so by learning about my own family of origin, how we operated, and what influences I had, led me to Southern Connecticut State University, where I really wanted to know that when I hung a shingle to become a therapist, that I really knew what I was doing. And I am fascinated by systems because we're not hatched. We all come from someplace. So I wanted to understand how family dynamics, just influenced the decisions that I made. And then certainly when working with clients, how their families of origin influence them. And the conflict resolution part is definitely a piece of family systems, helping, families to understand how to talk, or probably more so listen to one another with a curious lens so that they can create greater understanding and compassion.
I love what you had said, that we're not hatched. That is such a good phrase.
Well, we're not. and we all come from somewhere. And I'm very Italian. And I know that even just my Italian culture has had such a impact on me. How I cook, how I carry myself, the belief systems that I have. And so we know that everyone comes from somewhere, and those influences can both be positive and then challenge us to find our resilience at the same time. Not everything is fabulous. And so by understanding the generations before me, it's helped me to carry on traditions and parts of my family of origin that I really loved. And then other parts in which, what did I want to do differently? What didn't fit me as an individual? And I'm grateful to say that I received a tremendous amount of support to be able to do that.
It's interesting how sometimes helping yourself can help you realize how you can help others as well. Once you dig into yourself, you're like, wow, these are all these things that I didn't know I had in me, or I didn't know how to unlock. And now I can help so many other people unlock because I'm unlocked. I've figured it out, which I think is a cool tool to have as well.
I would agree with you. And of course, I'm biased as a therapist that I think therapy is an incredible asset. And when we were in school, one of the things that I loved about our program at Southern was that it was also very experiential. Besides the classroom piece, which obviously, we needed to learn theory and practice, but that we actually practiced behind a one-way mirror, and which was very nerve-wracking. However, it was such a learning experience to actually either provide live therapy with the support of a clinical supervisor and a whole team of students, or to be on the other side where I was a little, you're a little bit removed, where you could watch the interactions and see, oh, that's what's happening right there. And so that was such a rich experience in terms of how that shaped me. And they strongly encouraged way back when that you participate in therapy yourself, so that first of all, you would know what it felt like to sit in that chair. And so that once you got to sit in the other chair, you would, be able to have that lens of, wow, what is it like to feel so vulnerable sitting in front of a stranger that I've never met before, and how to help them to feel comfortable and safe and create that warm environment. So that was also an important part as well.
And I do believe that you are also a member of the board of directors for the Connecticut Association for Marriage and Family Therapy. Is that correct?
Yes.
So what does this association do for the field?
So Connecticut has about 2,500 to 2,800 marriage and family therapists, both licensed and associate licensed, fully licensed. So what CTMFT does is one of the main things we do. Well, there's two major parts. One is advocacy work, and the second is education. So if we were to break it down, those are two of the main functions. Then, of course, we have a phenomenal social media director who makes sure that all the information gets out there. We have someone who works with the MFT programs here in Connecticut to provide education around what does it mean to become a member of CTMFT. So for advocacy work, we could just talk about this past year was amazing. Our advocacy chair, and of course we do have a lobbyist, but our advocacy chair and the board for years has been working on parity for LMFTs. So, we all have to pay our licensing fee to the state of Connecticut. We were paying approximately $120 more a year than some of our other master level counterparts. And they work to have full parity. So which never happens. When do your fees go down with something? So our licensing fees actually decreased because of all the work they did. We created parity around reimbursement. FTs can now work in schools. So there were a lot of places, because there was misunderstanding around what licensed marriage and family therapists could do. There was a lot of misunderstanding about what positions we could hold. So at one point, a million years ago, we weren't allowed to work at the state of Connecticut and DCF. They would very rarely hire us because we didn't have the right credentials. So now the Department of Children and Families definitely hires, MFTs. The school systems, we're now in the school systems where before we were not able to do that work. And certainly at the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, we are there as well. We can work at agencies anywhere now. We are able to diagnose. We work with individuals as well as couples and families. So we can do it all. And this, the same with our systemic lens, because our lens is a little bit different. That's what we focus on in school, is how to think systemically, even while working with an individual, which is interesting. Because it brings in, again, we're not hatched. It brings in the whole dynamic and what they're bringing with them. That is a piece. And then the other piece is education. We have this incredible education chair who does these knockout 2-day conferences, brings in incredible speakers, breakout sessions, varying topics. And, the team, obviously the entire board helps with that as well. So that's a lot of what CTMFT does. And I'm the chair-elect beginning in January. I am a little nervous about that because the chair has been there for 6 years and she's marvelous. So those are big shoes to fill when you're taking over when someone's done an incredible job. So
obviously, like, regulatory bodies are so necessary for these positions where you're really working directly with vulnerable people. But one of my friends is an LCSW, and I have a friend who's a licensed speech pathologist. And it's like, at some points, these are prohibitive, particularly financially, where it's like, you want to do this work to help people, but then you are put in a position where you're suffering to help other people by having to, cough up. I think for my friend who's a speech pathologist, it's like $200 every couple of years. It's not cheap.
correct. And we were $320 per year. We are now down to $200 per year.
That's
and
still
then tack on malpractice insurance and all the other pieces that you need to either run a business or be part of, a nonprofit agency. It's not inexpensive by any means, all of the costs that come with this. So that was such an amazing accomplishment. And the same with MFTs in schools. It just a major, major accomplishment. And our national system of the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy, after years of lobbying and working, because these things take time. We know that any kind of congressional movement takes a while to complete, but we are now eligible to be paneled with Medicare, which is the first time in history. So MFTs will be allowed to take on that population where we were unable to before. So that's another huge achievement. So, and to your point, yes, we need to be, reimbursed properly as well for all of the hard work that we do and the money that goes back out from us.
So could you just explain a little bit more the difference between different credentials for therapists?
Sure, absolutely. So I think most people are familiar with social workers. Yeah, social workers have been around since probably prior to the Depression, where there really was this need during the Depression to help families, and they have done a marvelous job. The clinical social workers can do varying tracks. So you'll see some work in public health, some will do medical social work, some will work for state agencies like DCF for the purpose of making sure that every child is home and safe and where they're supposed to be, wherever that means for that child. And then they certainly can do clinical work at any agency or have their own private practice as well. And public health is another area in which social workers can work. There are varying tracks. So they go through their master's program, decide which track they're going to take. The licensed practical counselors really focus on mental health. And I have to say, I'm not as familiar with all of their curriculum, but I have worked with a lot of licensed practical counselors who are excellent and very highly trained. And then marriage and family therapists, we definitely do learn how to work with individuals. And then our concentration is really systemic thinking. So we, take courses and learn how to work with couples. We learn about family dynamics. We learn about structural families, how to work with a family and make sure the hierarchy is in place. So those are some of the difference. They're all master level programs. The concentration is just different.
I think one of my therapists was an LMFT and one was an LCSW. So it's like, I know these are kind of the same thing. Just never really thought about it.
Well, why would you? I mean, nobody sits around and says, I think I'll investigate all the kind of different therapists that are out there. It's just more of, I really need somebody to talk to right now. And I like their bio and that looks good to me. Or you get a referral from a friend or said, I went to so-and-so and they were really helpful. And, nobody's sitting around and saying, I want a specific kind of therapist. So, sometimes I do get that sometimes, especially with couples. There's something about the marriage, people will pick that up and on, I'm on Psychology Today. And I will get quite a few calls around couples therapy. I'll notice that part. And so that's why they call.
So we're going to be seeing a lot of you in 2024, at least in the beginning. You're here for couples training 1 and 2 and for family systems. Would you mind just talking a little bit about what participants can expect, maybe how those trainings are connected?
So our family therapy program on January 17th is going to begin with structural family therapy by Mnuchin. So Mnuchin focused on mapping family relationships, family rules and roles, communication styles, making the covert overt, and disrupting dysfunctional patterns and patterns within relationships. So that will be the morning. And then in the afternoon, we're going to squeeze in Bowen's theory in 8 interlocking concepts, which is how do we differentiate from our families of origin? Triangles, because there's usually always a triangle if you think mom, dad, child, or grandmother or mother-in-law, right? And the couple. The family emotional process, how families work through their emotional process or don't. The family projection, because one generation will project onto another. That's very, very common. And cutoffs, the dangers of when we cut someone out of our life and what that does. Multi-generational transmission process. We talk that also has a lot to do with transgenerational trauma, right? So, as we were talking before about how wonderful the Women's Consortium is, they did so much work on trauma, and families will absolutely pass on their trauma. It's not intentional. No one's doing it on purpose. It's not to hurt each other. It's part of our human nature. And so how do we break those generational patterns? Very often we will see when there is substance abuse and or sexual abuse in one generation, unfortunately, sometimes that can go to the next generation. So sibling position matters. I am a fourth born. We're like the border collies of the family. Everybody has to be together. We gather everyone together. Fourthborns want to make sure that, people are not in pain and we're there and available. And each sibling position has a role and rules in which they unknowingly follow. And then how does society, the emotional process of society, how does that impact us? So because society is a system as well. And how is what's going on in society impact us? So that is what we'll be doing. If people are planning on attending, I want to give forewarning. This is not, I don't get up and talk for 6-8 hours. I don't like that. This will be very interactive. We will break into groups. We will practice vignettes so that what people are learning, they can actually practice right then and there. This is about participation. I would love if people could bring some case presentations and we can break it down and take a look at some of what we're talking about here now and where to look for that within the family system. So what participants can also expect is when they leave, they may already know how to do this, but how to assess a family. What are the said and unsaid rules and roles? I love giving this example. My mom would, we had a large Italian family and there would be a lot of people sitting around, the table. And my mother, with just a look, could get my sister and I to clear the table. And so that was one of those unsaid rules that if there was company, we were expected. It was never said. It's just we were expected to participate and make the guests feel welcome. So hopefully people will learn how to interrupt those dysfunctional communication and patterns that goes on in families. Who's aligned with who? Sometimes someone will align with mom against dad, or mom against mom, or dad against dad, or 1-2 siblings are close and they leave the other sibling out. It depends. And then, how to learn about the history and then use it to see how it impacts the family now. Certainly, how does mental health, substance use disorders impact families? Because we know it impacts everyone, not just the person who is under the influence or is suffering from mental health. So these are some of what people will learn and leave with. And I'm really looking forward to this one because this is, near and dear to my heart and what I practice a lot of.
I work in the education and training department, so I sit in a lot of the trainings, And because I'm not a behavioral health specialist, not all of the trainings pertain to me in like, specifically or how I do my job, but I do have a family system. So I'm very interested for this training because I like getting to the root of things or really picking up on how has this shaped someone as a person.
Yes, absolutely. Because that matters. It helps us to have more compassion and understanding for one another when we know where each other is coming from. I have a sister and a brother. They're both older than I am, and their roles are different. And even their experience with the same parents was different. It just was different. And so even if we're all together, it's interesting because we interpret things just so very differently. And so it's an exciting topic, I think, because it helps everyone to understand. And I also think, with this, and I didn't say this before, but certainly culture, race, ethnicity, gender play a huge role in how we interact with others as well, and how people hear us and how we hear them.
Birth order is just really interesting to think about because I feel like we think about roles in families in terms of like age hierarchy, but more older younger sibling and not necessarily like when did you arrive to this dynamic. And it's just me and my brother. So I do feel like we fall into some of those kind of stereotypical older sibling, younger sibling roles where I feel like I was asked to do a lot of things that my parents just gave up on with him or gave him a lot more freedom than they gave me or let things slide with him that they wouldn't have let slide with me. So, but I feel like that is interesting that that's kind of common across the board with everyone I know who's an older sibling.
That is really interesting because I will say, as the youngest sibling, my sister paved the way for me in so many ways. She did so much hard work so that I could have privileges that in some ways she didn't have. So to your point, it really depends on your birth order, and gender plays a role in families. So what families expect from their children can be different just based on gender.
We were actually talking about this within our company earlier today, just how the order of like birth order and just when you came at what span of time, how long, how old were your parents when they had you or when you were growing up. And like Alana, just me and my older sister, who was also named Alana. And so we are two girls, so it's not like we have like the gender role that is different, but she's still very much so you got to do so much that I didn't do, or you got to do it sooner than I did. And whenever she brings it to my parents, they're like, well, you didn't die. So we let your sister do it because you turned out okay.
That's fantastic. Oh, I like that answer from your parents. What a wonderful answer.
Yeah, your older sister was the guinea pig.
Yeah, basically.
That's right. That's right. And sometimes too, we just have to accept the fact that fairness isn't really a real thing. And that some are able to do certain things in families and some are not. And that's also part of the process. There is a tremendous amount of fairness, even though we think that fairness, justice is hopefully what we can have versus fairness.
Yeah, I feel like that fairness idea goes back to what you were saying about not being hatched, where regardless of everyone's different upbringing, and I mean, it goes back to like nature versus nurture, but we have this general expectation of what a family should be doing kind of across the board. And I feel like fairness is a big thing where it's like you want the same treatment as your siblings, and pretty much regardless of other factors, I think most families that's common. Or it's kind of an expected value.
Yes. And families value things differently. And so what's of a large value in one family isn't necessarily a large value in another. So I also think coming to that understanding is really important to your point. I'm glad you brought that up.
Or even different family members value certain things.
Yes.
Within the same unit.
Absolutely. Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. How I look at things and where my value system is absolutely can. Some of it's different from my siblings, some of it isn't, just because of the way I guess we are, but we definitely can view things a little bit differently. And so just it's even, and when I'm sitting with a family and I'm working with a family, it is interesting sometimes because it's almost like we're all four of you or three of you or five of you there at the same time. The differing of viewpoint of when something went on, how it affected that person. Somebody may not have even have paid attention. Another person may have felt like this was a pivotal moment in their life. It's really interesting that even all the members of a family can experience something very differently.
Could you talk a little bit about your couples training? And you mentioned that there's a third piece too. So I guess just the progress of those and, if you will, a little bit about how it relates to the family systems work.
Yes, I would. I am very honored. Dr. Barbara Lynch began the program at Southern Connecticut State University for MFTs. And throughout her career, she studied couples besides families. She did a tremendous amount of studying of couples. She wrote a book before she passed called The Couple and Couples Therapy. Barbara was an absolutely brilliant woman and taught me. I just spent 18 years mentoring and teaching me. I could not be more grateful. And this is a way for me to honor her. So I've taken her book. I've gotten permission from her husband, Dr. Lynch, to be able to present this as a 3-part series. It is a rather dense book. It's an excellent book, but like most clinical books, you have to, you read a line, do you ever read a very dense book and you're like, I'm sorry, what did that say? I have to go back 3 times. Couples therapy is said to be one of the most complex and rewarding therapies to provide. What this 3-part series offers is to learn the critical foundation of the couple. So how do couples bond? What are the development stages of the couple? The examination of the couple composition, which areas the couples may become stuck, and how to move the couple to create the relationship they want. And this is going to sound counterintuitive without interfering, which is an art in itself, right? Because we want couples to learn how to talk to each other, not the therapist. So as much as we possibly can, not become the mediator, because obviously therapists go away. So the whole point of therapy is to help someone, whether an individual, a couple, or a family, get to where they want to be and not need us anymore. I mean, that's the purpose. So in the first part series, we're going to study the developmental stages of the relationship, the anatomy of bonding in the couple, and then the sequential behaviors in the couple. So we're going to break her work down to 3 parts. Again, all of these trainings will be interactive and we'll have vignettes and an opportunity to practice. So that's an important part of the process. Couples therapy can be complex just because of all of the moving parts. It's really how not to interfere, but interfere. And I know that probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's really what we're supposed to do because we want to be really respectful of the couple unit and their relationship and whatever their relationship looks like, and just help assist them to really create the relationship that they want. So this isn't just for married couples. This is for partnerships, couples, anyone, any couple. That's the way the work is. So the part 2, we're going to look at how do we help couples to become real partners, because there's a difference between being in a relationship and figuring out how to be a partner. I mean, my husband and I, who's also a licensed marriage and family therapist, we've been married now for 27 years, us just trying to figure out how to be true partners. Where is the power dynamic? Who's more in charge? Who's not in charge? Who's trying to control things? So it takes a while to work those things out. And then ego equality. We talk about equity and equality a long time. That's not easy to create in a relationship. That is another complex process. And then axioms for couples therapy, and then The last part of the part 2 will be what is couples, what is it not, and how to do it successfully. So those are the first two trainings. And then we can move on to the third if you'd like, unless you have any questions about those.
I'm interested in all of these trainings. These are so interesting.
So the day 3 is going to cover the essentials of couples therapy, marital evaluation and treatment options, and then strategy for change. People come into therapy wanting to change, or their desire is to change. And the same with couples. They don't want to stay in a painful place. They want to move forward. So that is the last day. And hopefully with those 3 full days, people will leave it with some new tools, new understanding, new interventions, thinking differently about couples, thinking about their role as a therapist in a different way, helping truly couples to talk with one another, setting up those kinds of exercises. So again, we don't interfere. So that is one of the biggest things. So I prefer interactive trainings. I find them in workshops. I for me, learn by listening and then doing. And so hopefully participants will gain that same thing. And then of course we'll have some laughs and a little bit of fun. So those are those 3 trainings.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it very, very much.
It was fabulous to meet you and just to be able to have this conversation. And I was already interested in the topics, just seeing the title. And now I'm even more interested and ready for them to come. So this was great.
I'm so glad this is a podcast versus that it's a YouTube video. I have to say, I'm always grateful for that as well. So.
Well, your hair looks great. So you're ready for the camera.
I know, I was thinking that earlier.
I'm sure your listeners absolutely want to know about my hair.
It's fabulously parted, looks nice and bouncy on the bottom. Links will be in the description so you can keep up with us at the Connecticut Women's Consortium and also sign up for Debra's upcoming trainings, Family Systems on January 17th, Couples Training 1 on February 14th, fabulous day for a couples training, Couples Training 2 on March 13th, and then that third one she was talking about will be on our next catalog in the spring, which you will hear about sometime soon. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Be kind to yourself.
Bye.